Happy 4th of July. Welcome to our Zoom Palestine 4th of July special, where we're talking about Israeli raids and their red, white, and blue surveillance systems that they are inflicting upon Palestinians, making them the most surveilled country on the planet. And in memory of the fact that as we celebrate our freedom and independence, we acknowledge that the Palestinians are fighting for their freedom and independence, the same as Americans fought in 1776. Now the Palestinians are called terrorists because they're fighting for their independence. Well, the American colonialists who are fighting for their independence were also called terrorists. So let's celebrate the battle for independence that the Palestinians are waging, and let's play the wonderful song "My Blood is Palestinian" by Muhammad Asif, a particularly relevant song for today.
أنا قصدي أنا ديني على أرض تلاقيني أنا أهلي أنا فديهم فلسطيني 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 أنا دمي فلسطيني
Beautiful that is. So welcome to Zoom Palestine and to the terrible news that we're dealing with this week on the massacre in Jenin. And also earlier this week, there was a report of a meeting at the UN between the UN and Amnesty International, and also some groups in the EU Commission talking about the apartheid created by surveillance. The AI is creating a system of even worse apartheid in Palestine, installing cameras that are capturing faces of Palestinians, putting them in databases, and violating the human rights of people in a total to establish a total apartheid system. So we're going to be looking at the articles that the Electronic Intifada had for today. Title of one is: the Palestinian Authority does our job for us, because the Palestinian Authority is so ineffectual in protecting Palestinians. Another article: where am I supposed to go? Where the Gaza authorities have told people they have to leave their homes. But the main article we're going to look at, and one of the most concern for us today, is that 8 are killed as Israel bombs, bulldozes Jenin refugee camp. And while we're looking at that, reading that article, we will also be looking at some photos from Al Jazeera's photo essay on Israel's daily deadly raids on the Israeli camp. And when they wrote it, there were only 5 people killed. Now we know that there are at least 8 people who have been killed in the attacks on the Jenin refugee camp. And the first picture here that we're looking at from Al Jazeera's photo essay, it talks about how the Palestinian health minister said that the air raids killed at least 5, but now we know it's 8, and wounded 27, and now it's more, with several of them in critical condition. And it's a picture of the Palestinian ambulance, the Red Crescent trying to save people. So we're looking at this article, and we will move it a little bit to the edge so we can see it better. The Israeli forces have killed at least 8 Palestinians, so this is updated today, during an ongoing major military offensive in the northern occupied West Bank of Jenin, the largest operation of the territory since 2002. It's interesting that the New York Times also did a very large article on this invasion, and Al Jazeera notes it's the second time in less than 2 weeks that they have raided Jenin, killing at least 8 and wounding dozens. So people were also shot dead in Ramallah as well as Jenin. Hundreds of Palestinians were streaming out of the Jenin refugee camp, and yet another chapter of displacement as Monday came to a close. That was yesterday. The Israeli military denied that it had ordered the evacuation of part of the camp. The Palestinian Red Crescent Society said it evacuated 3,000 Palestinians from the camp. And here, as we noted, was a picture of the Red Crescent Society. They evacuated around 3,000 people out of the camp. At least 2 of those killed since early Monday were civilians, according to the Palestinian Center for Human Rights. Defense for Children International said 2 of those killed were children: Noor al-Din Marshood, 15, and Majdi Arawi, 17. Ayed Abu Taish, a program director for the Children's Rights Group, called on Karim Khan, chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, at minimum issue a preventative statement in an effort to deter ongoing Israeli war crimes. Al-Haq, a Palestinian human rights group, called on third states to stop empty verbal condemnations and implement concrete measures to end Israel's impunity. And this impunity has been a huge problem because Israel just gets away with doing whatever it wants to. They've launched air raids for the second time in 2 weeks, this camp is a densely packed area that houses around 14,000 people in less than half a square kilometer. What's going on in the refugee camp is real war, said Palestinian ambulance driver Khalid Ahmed. There were strikes in the sky targeting the camp every time we drive in with around 5 to 7 ambulances. We come back full with injured people. Tensions have been running high across the occupied West Bank in recent months, and repeated Israeli raids into Palestinian. Here we go. So nearly 185 Palestinians have been killed by the Israeli forces since the start of this year, according to their health ministry. At least 25 Israelis has also been killed in separate attacks during the same period. The Israelis' attack set off a gun battle that lasted until Monday morning, with the sounds of explosives and drones continuing to be heard across Jenin hours after the raid. So let's go back to our Al Jazeera article. Al-Haq, a Palestinian human rights group, called on third states to stop empty verbal condemnations and implement concrete measures to end Israel's impunity. The invasion began around 1 a.m. on Monday when Israeli forces moved into Jenin and its refugee camp and closed off the camp entrances so nobody could get out, isolating it from the city, while Israeli airstrikes targeted civilian infrastructure. 4 Palestinian fighters were killed as residents attempted to repel the invading forces. PCHR identified them as, and their names are here. 1 or more Israeli snipers executed 3 Palestinians whose bodies were seen piled on top of each other in a street in Jenin refugee camp, in videos and photos that circulated on social media. And here's a picture of the bombing. Residents have said there were at least 10 air attacks early Monday, sending smoke billowing from the wreckage of buildings. Here's the attacks came around great escalating violence in the occupied West Bank, including the first Israeli drone assault on the area since 2006, increasing military raids on Jenin and northern Palestinian territories and settler attacks on Palestinian villages, which have been going on with impunity. Al Jazeera's Nida Ibrahim, reporting from Ramallah, said that the Israeli military also announced the arrest of several wanted Palestinians and the seizure of explosive devices. At least 185 Palestinians, 25 Israelis, a Ukrainian, and an Italian have been killed in the conflicts this year, according to official sources from both sides. And here's inside of an ambulance. And here we have a picture of the recent unrest that voted global concern, with the United Nations Human Rights Chief condemning Israel's use of heavy weaponry, including drones and helicopter gunships in the West Bank, which it has occupied since 1967. So let's continue reading what Electronic Intifada has to say. Let's read the names of the people who were killed. I think they deserve to have their names read. Noor al-Din Marshoud, Sami Abu al-Wafa, Aus al-Hanoun, and Hussam Abu Tiba. And then these really executed 3 who were just on the sidewalks. The first shot was fired at Ali Al-Ghul, who was 20, who was hit in the chest. And when Majdi Arawi, 17, attempted to pull Al-Ghul out of the street, he was shot in the head. The third man, Muhammad al-Shami, 18, was hit when he attempted to evacuate the other wounded men. The three of them were laid to bleed for more than half an hour when people managed to pull them inside one of the houses. By then, all three were dead. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the West Bank reported at least 28 injuries, mostly among civilians, with 9 in critical condition. In addition to those killed in the ongoing incursion into Jenin, 21-year-old Mohammed Hassani was shot in the head and killed before dawn on Monday during a protest against the raid at Jenin near Beit El settlement in the central West Bank. Israel destroyed civilian infrastructure, and troops have targeted paramedics and journalists during their genuine invasion that Israel said could last for 2 or 3 days. Video showed Israeli military vehicles ripping up roads in the Jenin refugee camp and the widespread destruction left in its wake. This is really tragic and sad beyond belief. And nobody's saying who. It was a big article, though, in the New York Times today. But basically, the situation of what's going on with the Palestinians is just typically ignored, especially because an election year is coming up and they're all afraid of the pro-Israeli lobby, Zionist Jews, and the Messianic fundamentalist Christians who all are happy for Israel to take over Palestine and exterminate all the Palestinians. So it's just a tragic situation, but there is hope. There's the Not on Our Dime action led by Jewish Voice for Peace and a whole bunch of pro-Palestinian rights. This is legislation being introduced into New York State to prevent pro-Zionist organizations from funding illegal settlements and obtaining a not-for-profit tax status. So it's just a slap on the wrist, basically, but it's a beginning, and at least it opens the conversation to discussing the plight of the Palestinians. So now they've launched their attacks physically, and now they're going to create a surveillance state. And actually, a few days before the attacks, it was noted an increase of the implementation of Red Wolf and Blue Wolf software, which will basically create a 1984 situation for the Palestinians where they will have no privacy and they will be basically totally coping with apartheid, AI apartheid in the West Bank. So let's listen to this video that discusses this terrible situation. There is a sound.
The occupied West Bank. So, how far does that breach their privacy? And does this technology really offer Israel greater security? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Adrian Finnegan. Israel's use of artificial intelligence to mass surveil Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. That's the focus of talks this week between members of Amnesty International and EU Commission officials in Brussels. The human rights organization says that Israel is employing what it calls automated apartheid to build a digital database of the Palestinian population. Former Israeli soldiers say they've been ordered to photograph people to update vast databases. Palestinians say it's yet another invasion of their privacy. Al Jazeera's Laura Khan reports.
Military checkpoints, cameras, and roadblocks. These are part of the daily reality for Palestinians living in the occupied West Bank. And now Israel is rolling out more digital tools to spy on them. One is a facial recognition technology called Blue Wolf that's described as the Facebook of Israel's occupation. Hebron is considered one of the world's most surveilled regions, but Amnesty says it's now being rolled out across the occupied West Bank. In a report called Automated Apartheid released last month, it said Blue Wolf technology can entrench disadvantages and disempower marginalized groups. So what is Blue Wolf? The Washington Post noted the use of it 2 years ago. Smart cameras track and recognize people's faces. Israeli soldiers use the technology to take pictures of Palestinians and add them to a vast network compiled through mobile phones. Amnesty International says it creates a gamified system of competition underlying the system. That means it gives soldiers an incentive to compete in creating the highest number of profiles of Palestinians. Israeli forces say the main challenge they face in Hebron is friction between Israeli settlers and Palestinians, and the technology allows them to act faster. And many Palestinian residents say sensors have been installed by Israeli authorities and directed into their private homes and even bedrooms, and that this is just another pervasive technology to show the Palestinians they're being watched. Laura Khan for Inside Story, Al Jazeera.
Well, we contacted the Israeli army to ask why it's using AI surveillance technology, and for its response to the report, it said it carries out necessary security and intelligence operations while making significant efforts to minimize harm to the Palestinian population's routine activity. The statement also says that the military cannot refer to operational and intelligence capabilities in this context. Let's bring in our guests for today's discussion. From Brussels, we're joined by Matt Mahmoudi, Artificial Intelligence and Human Rights Advisor at Amnesty International. He's the lead author of this report. From Occupied East Jerusalem, Jalal Abu Khatta, who's a writer and community leader of the Right to Movement Palestine, and in Tel Aviv, Ori Givati, Advocacy Director at Breaking the Silence, a non-governmental organization established by veteran Israeli soldiers. So warm welcome to you all. Matt, let's start with you. Tell us more about this Amnesty report and its findings. Why does Amnesty consider facial recognition a technology that should be banned or at the very least severely restricted?
To be clear, Amnesty's policy is that there should be a ban on facial recognition technologies for mass surveillance and for discriminatory surveillance because the technology is simply incompatible with international human rights law. The technology depends on the curation of a large database without people's knowledge and consent, often scraping their images off of social media and other places, and therefore by design is considered a technology of mass surveillance and therefore incompatible with the right to privacy. We also consider that it's in violation of the right to equality and non-discrimination because of the inherent bias issues that exist within how the technology is trained on biased data sets, and also because there is a pattern of the technology being deployed in racially discriminatory contexts. And finally, because we find that the technology disincentivizes participation in protest, and so it's in violation of the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and the right to freedom of expression. So, you know, by its nature, we consider it in violation of international human rights law. And as far as the report is concerned, we've been looking at how facial recognition is reinforcing aspects of apartheid in the occupied Palestinian territories, paying particular attention to the ways in which it further exacerbates restriction on the freedom of movement, as well as sort of perpetuating the coercive environment that is in place to essentially force Palestinians out of areas of strategic interest to Israeli authorities and to illegal Israeli settlers. So in this report, we expose in particular the Red Wolf system, which is a system of facial recognition that is deployed at checkpoints in Hebron, in H2, making it very difficult for Palestinians to pass into areas to access medical care, services such as work, as well as schooling and education. And so you find that having to reckon now with an algorithm to access these very basic rights and services are exacerbating the already discriminatory problem problematic and deeply repressive conditions under which Palestinians find themselves in the West Bank and in places like East Jerusalem. For East Jerusalem, we've looked at the ways in which the Mabat 2000 system, which is now equipped with facial recognition, is being deployed in areas such as Sheikh Jarrah, Damascus Gate, Silwan, and around Al-Aqsa, making it even more difficult for Palestinians to resist the illegal annexation of East Jerusalem, finding themselves increasingly surveilled in everyday tasks such as attending family members or meeting up for coffee.
Matt, how does Israel's Blue Wolf differ from facial recognition programs that have been introduced by governments all over the world, the US and India, for example? I mean, most of us are monitored constantly these days by CCTV and other forms of surveillance wherever we live in the world. It's just a fact of modern society today, isn't it?
So to be clear, there's two systems in place currently in Hebron. There's a Blue Wolf system, which is the app-based tool that Israeli soldiers are using to both register Palestinian faces and to also look them up and gather all the information, display all the information quickly and instantaneously as they, for example, stop and frisk a Palestinian individual. The Red Wolf system, which is deployed at the checkpoint, means that now the movement of Palestinians are also heavily restricted. What we found in other uses of facial recognition, for example, in New York, where we looked at its usage against Black Lives Matter protesters, or in India, is how the technology is used invariably against protesters to diminish the civic space available to engage in civil disobedience, in dissent. What's particularly chilling about the way that it's deployed in the context of the OPT is the ways in which it is governing movement. So literally stifling individuals from being able to access basic rights and services, even in cases in which it's not deployed at the checkpoint, for example, with the Mabat 2000 system or with the Blue Wolf. It's very clear that Palestinians now have to contend with the additional calculus of fear involved in just engaging in everyday activities, increasingly diminishing the spaces available for Palestinians to live. We have accounts and testimonies of Palestinian families noting how in Hebron the incursion of facial recognition technologies is effectively destroying any form of social life.
We'll hear more about what life is like living under this kind of surveillance from Jalal in just a moment. But first, Ori, I want to ask you about what your former colleagues are telling you about how they feel about Israel's use of this technology. What is Israel's justification, do you think, for using it?
So, hi, and thank you for having me, and thank you for also the great work of Amnesty with this report, and we were happy to collaborate. I think that first of all, when we started hearing from soldiers who actually use these technologies in the last few years, we noticed a change. You know, we are using breaking the silence in the last almost 20 years. We're working to hear about the different ways we control and invade Palestinians' lives, right? So home invasions, invasions to villages, dispersion of protests, and many other military patrols, and all the very you can say routine parts of the way we control the Palestinian population in the occupied territories. And when we started hearing about the use of these systems, we are hearing about basically a new layer of control. Yeah. So if until now we've been controlling them only in the physical space, yeah, in their homes, in their streets, in the protests, we added another layer, which is basically controlling Palestinians' digital space. Yeah, so a Palestinian today in the occupied territory is not only feeling like his home might be invaded at any moment, yeah, but also that his most private, personal biometric information is also being controlled by the military. Now, when you talk about justification, and you take different elements of occupation, including digital surveillance technologies, the justification is always security. Yeah, when we published together with the Washington Post a year and a half ago, the military said something similar to what you read in the beginning of your introduction here, that it's in order to improve Palestinian lifestyle, right? It makes our control better, more efficient, right? If until the use of the blue wolf, the soldiers that they wanted to check, the background of an individual they stopped in the street, they had to call their base and give the base their ID number, and then in the base the soldiers needed to check the system. Now they take a photo and they immediately have the details. Yeah, it's making everything more efficient. But this kind of justification can, the security justification or making everything more efficient, this can be used for everything almost we see in the occupied territories. And in the end, we have to remember what we're talking about here. Yeah, we're talking about millions of people living under more than 56 years of military occupation in the context that the Palestinians that are stopped in the street, the photos are taken, they don't consent. They have basically, until the testimonies came and other research emerged, they have no idea what these photos are for. Yeah, they can't vote for a political party that is against it. Yeah, they can't vote for any party that is related to the way they are controlled. Yeah, they don't vote for the Israeli government, and there are no checks and balances on these databases. Who is maintaining them? Who is making sure they don't leak? Who is making sure they're secure enough? Yeah, so.
Okay.
Taking the military justification and look at what's actually going on the ground, it's very simple to understand. We're talking about a mechanism of further entrenching elements of occupation and apartheid, and not, as Israel loves to say, improving the Palestinian lifestyle.
Okay. Jalal, you've written that you live in a surveillance society which is no different to those depicted in dystopian science fiction novels. Tell us something about everyday life living under such surveillance. What impact does it have directly upon you, your family, your friends? It starts at home, doesn't it? Even before you've left the house.
Absolutely. I think this is the purpose of such a system of intrusive surveillance. It's something that's always interested me, like how it affects societies, and even through reading dystopian novels or watching movies as a kid, I could imagine the psychological impact such a surveillance society would have on people. And throughout the past 10 years of my life, maybe perhaps 67 years, I've seen this system of super intrusive surveillance being applied, and it is part of our every single aspect of our daily life, whether it's on the street, whether it's traveling, seeing family, or even communicating online, our telephones. The surveillance is existing in every part. Of course, it is a layer of many layers that Israel employs to cement and entrench a system of oppression, of apartheid, of settler colonialism. This is how the settler colony would dominate and control the population that is they're colonizing, basically. And as any Palestinian would tell you, we already face a harsh reality on every front. Some people are facing imminent forcible evictions from their homes, especially in Jerusalem, or the third of Palestinian Jerusalemites, over 100,000 Palestinians who live in construction that's deemed to be illegal by the Israeli authorities. Of course, this is because of systematic discrimination. People live in fear in the West Bank, fear for their life, the settlements expansion, and the violence is daily and occurring in every corner. The fact that there's another layer with an even further impact, psychological impact on us, the surveillance system, its purpose is to defeat us, to not resist this violent reality that we live through. They want us to put us off from resisting this horrible occupation, this horrible reality. And when you live in such a society, the thing that gives you hope as an individual is if you're engaging politically in activism, and if you're expressing your views, your opposition of this occupation and apartheid, if you're able to go on a march, if you have some basic liberties to protest and voice your opposition to the system. The fact that we don't have even the right to protest in the most simple, basic, unarmed, popular resistance form, the most basic forms, even posting on social media could get people arrested, charges such as incitement. So it's a multi-layered system of really violent reality that we have to live through.
Jalal, you also wrote that the surveillance that you're personally subjected to is nothing compared to what residents of Hebron are currently facing. What's going on in Hebron? Why is surveillance so much tougher there?
There are many tiers to this system of apartheid. Myself, as a Jerusalemite, we are constantly controlled and monitored, especially in Jerusalem. We are isolated from the rest of the Palestinian communities, especially in the West Bank, through checkpoints, through the wall. There is a certain reality that us as Jerusalemites, stateless Palestinians, live. We're not citizens of either state, but we are subjected to a different system because Jerusalem has been illegally annexed in 1980, and we're subjected to a different legal system. In the West Bank, Palestinians who are under direct Israeli control, they are subjected to a wholly different system, a military system, judges with a 99.7 conviction rate. Palestinians have close to no rights in the West Bank under Israel's military occupation. Palestinians have little rights elsewhere between the river and the sea. But, in the heart of Hebron, there is a settlement project that is basically in the heart of the city of Hebron. For example, in Nablus, you would consider more of the right to movement and the suffocation that people feel when Nablus is besieged, but settlements are surrounding Nablus. Hebron's different. The settlers, they don't number over 1,000, but they are in the heart of the most populous city in the West Bank. And people, Palestinians, they are subjected to the most cruel regime of apartheid, and surveillance is the top and most obvious layer. You can get stopped on the shop for groceries, you can get harassed on your way to school. The most basic acts of life are always constantly affected by the system of surveillance.
Ori, wouldn't it be cheaper to relocate the small number of Israeli settlers in the center of Hebron rather than investing so much in these surveillance technologies?
So first, I'll continue from where Jalal ended, and I totally agree with him. One of the things we see in Hebron is that it's kind of an occupation lab. Yeah, we see different tools of occupation, not only surveillance tech, but recently very prominently about surveillance tech. Start in Hebron, yeah, Blue Wolf. We know that's already existing all over the West Bank. Yeah, we have soldiers' testimonies from all over the West Bank using Blue Wolf. Red Wolf still only in Hebron as far as we know, but very possible will be expanded throughout the West Bank in the future. We also have other types of technologies. Recently we saw a remotely operated weapon installed in one of the most important checkpoints in Hebron, directed towards the Palestinian neighborhood. And we already know that after it was installed in Hebron, it was installed in at least 2 other refugee camps around the West Bank. So many of the different ways we occupy, ways we control, begin in Hebron and then expand throughout the West Bank. Now, about the settlement of Hebron, if we look at the way that Israel has been controlling Hebron, we can see, Hebron is kind of a microcosm of the occupation. Yeah, you have a settler in the middle of the city, you have 23 checkpoints, you have segregated roads, you have daily home invasions, incursions to Palestinian neighborhoods and so forth, which is exactly the way we control the entire West Bank. Yeah, of course, that if you think about it reasonably, yeah, you would say it doesn't make sense to put a settlement in the middle of the city. But unfortunately, right now, my country, not only right now, in the last few decades, decided that we want to pursue this messianic project. Yeah, and in order to pursue it, yeah, we will establish settlements not only around the West Bank, basically creating a closed zone, surrounding Palestinian cities, exactly like Jalal said, but in Hebron, establishing a settlement in the center of the city in order to support this project. Of course, that if you think about it reasonably, economically, and so forth, we have in weekends over 1,000 soldiers guarding this settlement. Yeah, of course, it doesn't make sense. But when you look at the politics, yeah, when you look at the broader project of the settler movement, Hebron is a pillar of that project.
Okay, and just before we get back to Matt, Jalal, you suspect there's something else going on here as well, in that it's not just about the surveillance technology, that the people of Hebron are, to a certain extent, the subjects of an experiment. This is technologies that Israel wants to profit from, it wants to sell on.
Absolutely. I think Hebron is an excellent, as Ori said, the lab for AI technology, for surveillance technologies, and as we all know, the technology that starts in this really oppressive nature in Hebron also spreads throughout the West Bank, and it's promoted and sold elsewhere across the globe as well. But I have to also point out the fact that also the Gaza Strip, under siege for over 16, 17 years, is also the lab for Israel's lethal technology, mostly the weaponry, the destructive bombs that have caused atrocities in Gaza. So I see that Israel, the settler colonial project in its entirety, is benefiting from those specific pockets, those labs, and learning exactly how to maintain the system of apartheid and colonialism throughout the land between the river and the sea. And what we see in Hebron is felt everywhere across Palestine. We will see in Jerusalem as well. We see in Gaza. It's all part of the same idea of dominating and controlling the Palestinian population. No rights, no civil liberties, quality of life that's always dwindling, no dignity, and just, I don't know, the most undignified existence. That's the control that the Zionist project wants to have in Palestine.
Matt, as we said at the beginning of the program, Amnesty is meeting with EU Commission representatives. What can the EU do about Israel's use of facial recognition technologies? Are any European companies involved in supplying the technology? Is it illegal for them to do so? And if EU manufacturers are encouraged not to supply such technologies to Israel, they'll simply be replaced by homegrown or Chinese ones, won't they?
So the two companies that we identified were TKH Security and Hikvision. TKH Security is a Dutch surveillance manufacturer. They're one of many companies that are operating / have products available that are of high likelihood of being used together with the Mabat 2000 system in East Jerusalem for surveillance. The EU AI Act, which is the landmark AI legislation currently under negotiation at the EU, is one avenue through which we can challenge the ways in which these technologies are currently supporting and enabling the scaling of apartheid policies against Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territories. We've been particularly concerned with what it would mean to potentially increase the prohibitions and what we class as being prohibited under the EU AI Act, such that a proposal that is suggesting the banning of export of any technologies that would be deemed as prohibited in the EU context from being exported to the Israeli authorities or any other state outside of the EU context for usage for human rights abuses elsewhere. So if we can get the AI Act to a point under which for example, retrospective remote biometric technologies would be prohibited, we would also be in a situation in which hopefully, with some courage, the technologies that would be used for these purposes by Israeli authorities in the occupied Palestinian territories could also be prohibited. As for whether the Israeli authorities might find another avenue for supplying themselves with technologies that can be used for facial recognition, of course, there may be other avenues and they may even be homegrown. However, by weakening the supply of hardware that is used together with facial recognition systems that are being supplied from the EU and from elsewhere, especially given obligations that these companies have under the UN guiding principles, for example, to ensure that they have human rights due diligence in place, that their products are not, for example, supporting and enabling international grave crimes, that we can create a non-permissive environment for companies to engage with helping the scaling of apartheid policies.
But Matt, the settlements are illegal, the wall is illegal, this surveillance we're discussing is part of an illegal occupation. Israel's just going to ignore any outcry and Amnesty campaigning on this issue like it always has. You're shouting in the dark, aren't you?
It may well be that we're shouting in the dark, though. Of course, the Amnesty, the motto tends to be that it's better to light a candle than to curse out the darkness. And in this case, I think that's very true, because as we begin to make it more non-permissible to engage in the supply of surveillance technology, as we begin to create almost a repugnant market, as it were, around the supply of surveillance and AI technologies, making it distasteful and public knowledge that that indeed human rights violations are being effectuated by the usage of AI technologies in places like Palestine, then we begin to make it more possible to weaken the system and to indeed bring even trials outside of the context of Israel and Palestine to the floor. I think it's very important that we begin to shine a light on how technologies that sometimes can seem a little ephemeral or hard to grasp are leading to real human rights consequences everywhere. And indeed, I think in the European context, there should be some cause to rethink and stop and take a pause and consider what it would look like to have technologies that are restricting the freedom of movement deployed here, because that is what we're seeing the natural conclusion of.
Ori, I've got about 30 seconds left, so quick answer, please. Is any of this pressure going to make any difference? Does Israel care?
Look, unfortunately, right now, with the most ultranationalist government we've ever seen, and I'm saying this as an Israeli, the EU, our friends, even also the US are not doing enough, not to protect Palestinians and also not to help our society. But we definitely believe that we and organizations like Amnesty must keep doing this work, bring this reality into Brussels, into the States, because eventually we will believe that they will take action. We just need it to be as soon as possible and not wait like they're waiting right now.
Gentlemen, there we must end our discussion. Many thanks indeed to you for being with us, Matt Mahmoudi, Jalal Abu Hatta, and Ori Gavati. And as always, thank you for watching. Don't forget you can see the program again at any time by going to the website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, join us at our Facebook page, facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can join the conversation on Twitter, our handle at AJ Inside Story. From me, Adrian Finnegan, and the whole team here. We'll see you again. Bye for now.
Wow, that was wonderful. Very interesting. Also a little depressing to understand how difficult and how pervasive. And I agree with the program moderator that Israel's going to ignore whatever anybody tells them to do anyway. But that as the ex-soldier, ex-IDF soldier for breaking the silence, and the Amnesty International guy said, we can't not speak out, we must continue to shine a light on this horrible practice. So thank you for joining me, Mahmoud, Sheikh, and whoever else is watching. And happy 4th of July to Americans celebrating independence. And we send our wishes to the Palestinians who also would like to be celebrating independence soon, that they are strengthened in their resolve to resist. I think that possibly, given the firepower of the Israeli government, that the Palestinians might think of other ways, of nonviolent ways of resisting, because certainly Israel has shown that it's got the upper hand when it comes to the military power. So how can Palestinians resist their situation successfully without using violence? So I think studying the tactics of Gandhi and Martin Luther King, and there was a very prominent, well-known Palestinian pacifist who wrote about this. I forgot his name. I have his book in Jordan, but I should get it out and maybe do a program on the alternate forms of resistance that Palestinians have been working on. And we just pray that the companies, the governments of the world will stop being afraid of the Israeli lobby, stop being afraid of losing voters and losing funding, and stop being afraid of being called anti-Semitic if they try to stop Israel from these war crimes. So thank you very much for joining me today. And we will see you just in 5 days on Saturday when we will continue this discussion of the efforts of the Palestinians for self-determination. And there's a big action coming up on July 11th, which is in 6 days, 7 days, run by many peace groups, pro-Palestinian groups. The Jewish Voice for Peace is one of the main groups sponsoring it, and I will be at that action, and I will be reporting from it on Facebook Live on our Zoom Palestine page. So, masalama, shukran, thank you for being here, and I'll see you at our next session. Happy independence for all oppressed peoples of the world. Bye. Masalam.